So the first few shots are done by Swifty and Doig Art. So let me play through this. So this is Swifty and Doig Art, who actually both have a Twitch channel and YouTube channel. You can find it linked down below in the description. I definitely recommend you guys check them out. They are amazing. They're really awesome people as well. And they teach a lot of awesome 2D animation stuff. Now this one's Anima Tunings and Swifty. Old Swifty. And it is just, I love the energy in this, the camera angles, the composition, just the general motion of it all is really cool. Now, specifically what I wanted to talk about on this is the way they time it to audio. So this clip actually does have audio. So let's actually play through that once. And for anyone who's curious, here's their YouTube channel. So this is Doig and Swift's YouTube channel. And then do I have the link to this? Yes, I do. So let's get the link here for you guys. So this is the entire compilation that these animations are from, if you want to check it out yourself. Let's see, we can't hear the clip audio. I wasn't playing it with audio, but let me actually play it here. So hopefully this will... Okay, let me increase the volume here. Okay, so let me play through this.
What did you do? Wow. Fucking weak link. Oh my god. I can kill you right now. Let me try.
So good.
Shit. No, it's good. Everything's good. Everyone's still listening out there?
So it's... The specific thing I want to talk about is how they handle the beats.
We're getting excited. Me too. Now stay focused. I got it! I got it! Yes! Yes, you do. Oh, what did you
Okay,
do?
so I love this. It's so well animated, and what I love about it is how they're hitting the beats. This whole compilation of clips here is very musically oriented. It's all about the piano piece that they're playing. So a lot of it is kind of animated to a musical element. Now, on top of that, there's a voice lines, which means that it has to be animated to the voices as well. This can be very tricky. A lot of people, when they first start animating, that's a very hard thing to deal with, especially when you've been doing body mechanics, for example. You're doing your own thing, doing your own timing, and then suddenly you're having to animate a shot. And let's say you're just dealing with dialogue, you have to time all of your actions to that dialogue. You can't just animate a motion wherever you want it to be. Let's say I want a character to hold and then react. And maybe, you know, I really want to make this hold a little longer. I'll add 20 frames. Okay. But if my dialogue doesn't have a hold in it, if it's talking and you can hear the character moving, I don't have a choice. I have to follow it. You're kind of tied down to it. This becomes even more so when you're animating to sound, to a beat, to music. So what I wanted to illustrate was just a few of the ways they kind of handle that. So let's actually... I love this. Okay, a little sidetrack. Look at that expression right here. Look at that. That's such a wonderful stretch into this kind of curve. Let's pick a different color, something that shows up into this beautiful curve here, and then right into more of a squashed pose right there. And then you really feel those lips coming out there. Oh, it's so good. And I love the little lines of the eyes. This is what I love about 2D animation, is those little extra details you can add, like those extra lines in the eye itself, just for that one frame. It's just so good. That expression. So it's so brilliant. I believe Swifty is the one that animated this. Her animation style and her drawing style, it is so appealing. I just love it. Her animations are actually one of the big inspirations for me wanting to do 2D animation and kind of starting to go into that. It's just so much fun to watch. But let's actually stick with the beat stuff. So the first area is going to be here. So we have this, like, what did you do? He hits. And you can see here how, listen to when you hear the sound. Right there. And I hope this is not too loud for people. I might actually tone that down. So we get that smash right in there. But the pieces are already coming up. They've animated the action before the sound. And this can be tricky. When you're animating, oh, is it too quiet? Okay, let me tone that up then. Okay, hopefully that's louder. Hopefully you can hear it. So let's see. So okay, good now. Perfect. So we can hear the sound right there. So this is the sound. I was gonna write the crash sound. I guess it's like crash. So we hear that right there on frame 66. But we can see that the pieces come up 3 frames earlier, which means the impact would actually happen probably around frame 62. Is that a bad thing? No, not at all. Audio does not have to be synced up to the frame. And this is something that can be very tricky to deal with at first. You actually have quite a bit of leeway in how you animate sound and animate to sound. The big thing is that we often want to see what happens first before we hear what happens. And this is not always the case. It is not a rule set in stone. But often, if you animate the sound directly on the frame, that is not a bad thing. In lip sync, that's how I tend to approach it. But depending on how fast actions are supposed to happen or how we're supposed to read it, sometimes that causes things to feel like it's laggy, like we are missing something. So what we can do to create a little bit better of a visual guide is that we have the actions happen before the sound. That creates a visual kind of anticipation to what we're about to hear. That's what's happening here. Crash, we see it visually, and then we hear it. Again, not a rule set in stone. You can actually go both ways, but this is the general way to approach it. And the way you can kind of think about it is which is faster? Well, light. Light is faster than sound. So that means that if something was to happen, you would see it before you hear it. That's pretty much it. So in this case, we are seeing it before we hear it. Yeah, so exactly. So there you go. So it's because the speed of light is faster. Now, honestly, if we were this far away, it would make no difference whatsoever in real life, unless you had like a super high speed camera and like super audio detection. It wouldn't make a difference whatsoever. But we can push that. We can exaggerate the physics of the world to help sell that moment. And in this case, by pushing that and kind of waiting for the elements to come crashing up, what happens is that it allows it it allows us to visually see the crash when the sound happens. So we can see all the debris when the sound is happening. So you don't have to worry about being super precise. Go with what feels good. And it just takes practice. A lot of times what I'll do when I'm animating is I'll try to animate to the sound, typically. And this is for my own personal shots, if I feel like, that sound, let's try offsetting it. I'll just take the sound and maybe offset it a few frames. Now, if you're given a piece of audio, you can't really retime it. That's kind of someone else's job, especially in the studio. So in that case, I might just do a rough pass where I animate to the sound. This way I know that my basic timing works. And I just kind of hit those moments. And then from there, I'll just do a quick pass of retiming. And whatever, Jaylene, thank you so much for the subscription. Oh man, geez, thank you so much. 2 months, geez, aw, thank you. Really appreciate that. I gotta get my mic out of the way so I can actually do the whole dance. Thank you so much. So I totally lost track of what I was saying. What I'll animate to the sounds. This way no worries. I am so easily distracted. Someone could just say shiny or like point a laser pointer at something and I'm gonna be like distracted. If there was like a shiny object in the back, you'd just see me like trying to get it. It was terrible. I'm like a magpie. Look at this shiny statue. What? In terms of the timing of the sound, the big thing that I try to do is time it to the sound. This way I know that my core timing is correct in the sense that I'm not way off in one way or another. And then from there, I will do a pass of, I guess you could say, timing adjustments, where I will try to see, does it feel a little better if I move it ahead of the sound a little bit? What if this point, maybe it was a little bit behind? And there's no specific rule to this. There's not like, okay, for this type of motion, it has to be 3 frames. For this type of motion, it has to be 4 frames. For this one, only 1 frame. Not at all. Sometimes, for example, with this, it's a 4-frame lead to the actual action because the crash would happen here. This is when the actual impact of the instruments should happen. And then it takes 4 frames for the sound to actually come in. This because they're dealing with the scrap coming up. If we could see his feet, if this was shot differently where we could see all the way down to his feet, there might only be like a 1 or 2 frame offset between the sound and the crash happening. Same thing with lip sync. Sometimes lip sync is going to be spot on and it works beautifully. Other times it's going to be a 1 frame offset. Other times maybe a 2 frame offset. It depends on how hard it's hitting, what the distance the camera is from the character, how expressive it is, what sound it is. So for example, B's and P's typically have to be much closer to the sound that it's creating. Other sounds have a lot more, like ahs and e's, can be pushed a little bit more. It's just the way the mouth moves. We don't notice the connection as much, you could almost say. So it's just something to be aware of. Don't worry about animating to the beat, like to the exact sound. Now, that kind of leads us into the next thing. And yes, I'll take a sip of water here. Now, that leads us to the next thing, where we now know that we don't have to animate to the beat exactly, which allows us to add variation to an animation that is set to a beat. So let me find, I think there's a moment in here.
Wow. Fucking weak link.
I just want to say, I love the way he steps here. Like, look at that beautiful pose. the anticipation down here as he comes down, and then this big motion he's leading out with his arms as he takes a step. Great, beautiful posing, and then he just kind of steps over. That little balance there. I love how the other character's laughing on the piano.
Right
Let me try.
So, yeah, like Baloo in the Jungle Book, exactly. So, right, I think it's in the next shot after this one. This one, yeah, right here. So he's moving to the beat. It's down, down, up, over. So let's actually focus just on that. So he's down, up, over. So it's down, up, over to a beat. He's moving to a beat. But if we listen to when he hits the notes, so there's the note here, it hits, and then he moves. There's the next note right there, and then he moves. So note, 3 frames. So note, but this one, 2 frames. And then, so note, 2 frames. And then here, this is the next note, but he already moved. Or actually, sorry, the next move is actually here. So note, look how late this is. And this is because he held that note for 2 beats. So instead of moving on every note, it's not da 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 da. Hold down. So he's holding that for 2 beats. And then he hits, as he hits his pose here, as he gets down into the lowest low, he hits right on the next note. This is the next note right here. So he was delayed, delayed, delayed. So we heard note, movement, note, movement, note, hold. He moved, hit the note directly. And now, right here, there's the next note right there. And he's 1 frame off. Just 1. And then the next note begins his next motion. And then they hit 1 frame off here. And then they hold. So, what does that mean? It's a lot of numbers. Honestly, you don't have to worry about the numbers specifically. Just keep in mind that they weren't even. He wasn't hitting every note exactly on a metronome. So as we hit the notes, we don't have to hit like 1 frame off of each one. Sometimes it was 3 frames. Other times it was right on. Other times 1 or 2 frames off. It doesn't necessarily matter. Now, another thing we're seeing is that he's moving after the notes. So he's not leading it. This is because he is chasing after the music. So if you kind of think about this in a different sense, his hands are the things that are creating the music. So he hits a note with he's playing the piano, so he hits the note, that's going to create the sound. So if I'm animating this and I was viewing the hand, I would want the hand to probably lead the motion, like the throw of the instruments, where you have the fingers hit, then you hear the sound. If the sound came first, that wouldn't make any sense. But his head is listening to the music. He is listening to the beat, which means that he is following the music. The music is leading in this case. So his motions happen after the beat. Now what that creates, if you were to see his hands, is a beautiful offset. Where his hands are leading, his body is following. And you're not just getting this mechanical finger hit, beat, finger hit, beat. It's just exactly timed where his head and his hands are moving together. You're getting this mechanical dance in a sense of lead and follow. His hands are leading the music because his hands are creating it. His head is following the music because he's listening to it and reacting to the music. That creates a character that feels believable. A character that isn't just moving on a metronome. He is not a metronome. He is not a mechanical thing. So it's a little detail, but it makes the characters come to life. So when we watch this again here, pay attention to those movements.
Still listening out there?
It's very slight, and then we get this last beat here where he kind of goes dink. And right here, we hear the note, and then the head comes down. So the head moves one frame after we hear the note. We start to hear that note. So that adds a really nice offset to things. It creates this organic feeling to this motion. The same thing happens with lip sync. The same thing happens with any animation to sound. You are not locked into the sound. It doesn't mean that you have full freedom. If you're trying to animate a character that's actually on a beat and they're not just doing their own random thing to music, you want to get it close, but you are not locked in. Play around with it. Change the timing of it. Allow some things to delay a little bit longer. And really think about the connection of the animation to the sound. Again, does it lead? Does it follow? Or should it hit right on? There is no rule to this. There are guidelines that we can follow, but honestly, there's many exceptions to those guidelines. So sometimes, even though we want let's say they're playing the piano and we want the finger to hit, there are certain times where we might want that sound to lead the action. Not in a piano, I would say probably not in the sense of playing a piano, but there are other situations where that might actually be what we want in order to sell the scene better. It really depends. So just keep that in mind. Make note that you are not locked in to the exact beats of something happening. So let's take a look at this one more time here.
Oh, what did you do? What did you do? Wow.
So I'm actually going to mute this here. So what I want to just show here is this beautiful contrast in this moment right here. And let's see, wish I could do 2D. So do I. Like Tony mentioned, it's really just practice. Even just doing quick little doodles can really make a difference. I'm still in the process of trying to get there, but keep in mind that 2D doesn't always have to be super detailed like this too. If you look at what's his name, no, I'm gonna try to, okay, here it is. What is the animator's name? KK. So I'm just going to try and find, okay, I think this is an animator who animates specifically on the Nintendo DS, which is really cool. So I'll give you the link here. And you can see these are his animations. They're really weird, kind of adorable. I really love just seeing how he animates different things. And he loves taking pictures of animals and then redrawing them. But a lot of it is just simple balls. It's just spheres and overlap. That's really it. And it's super appealing. I love his animations. They are so good. But in terms of complexity, you don't need to be able to draw full anatomy and all of this really complex stuff. Simple things like this can be just as appealing and interesting. So, look at that. So weird and cute. Now, in terms of needing some stuff, so you mentioned you need to buy a pen tablet first to do it digitally. Yeah, if you're animating with a mouse, that's going to be a nightmare. If you're looking for a pen tablet, I typically recommend Wacom tablets just because that's the only ones I've personally used. What I use to animate day to day is an Intuos 3 tablet, which is at least 16 years old now, at least, if not older, and it's still working great. You can get a new Intuos. I've heard they're really good. And then there are other companies like XP Pen is pretty good, I've heard. There's Huion. What else? There's a few others now. I've never really tried their stuff, so I can't recommend them other than, check them out, read some reviews. I don't know how good they are. I've heard good things. But yeah, so Huion. And as you get one, you don't need a big expensive drawing tablet. So for example, I've got a Cintiq back there. I use that mostly for sculpting and 2D animation now. But I just got that like a month ago, something like that. My whole career, as I've been animating for 10 years now, has been on an Intuos, this Intuos 3. So don't worry about getting a full pen display. That is not necessary. That is something that you can get if you're going into that and you're making it like, you've got the money and you've built up for it. Just a basic tablet is more than enough. And yeah, don't worry about getting, again, top of the line. The only thing I would say is make sure the size is correct. Don't get a teeny tiny one, because oftentimes that just makes drawing harder. I recommend like a medium size, like about the size of a piece of paper. The drawing surface should be about that size for most people. I've heard XP Pen gives some problems with Maya, but it looks really good and is apparently comparable with Wacom but cheaper. Okay, that's an interesting thing. I'll have to dig into that a little bit more. I'll have to see if I can maybe just get one myself, if I can save up some money just to test and get an idea of how they work. Yeah, you could also try starting to animate pencil and paper, or just drawing on pencil and paper. That's a good way to start. Just get a simple sketchbook and start drawing in that. If you can get a light box, that works really well as well. The main issue with a light box when it comes to animation is trying to keep the papers in line, so you need the pegs and everything. But that can often be a good way to at least look at possibilities. Maybe get them to sponsor. I don't think I'm a big enough channel for them to want to sponsor me. As much as that would be really cool. I would love that. Not so much because I need a new tablet. I don't think I'd ever switch from my Intuos 3, honestly. Even if I got a fancy new tablet, I've just been working on it for so long. It's so comfortable to me. But just so I can give an honest recommendation. That would be the main thing. Oh, awesome. Yes, definitely keep us try 2D and keep us let us know how it goes, because I would love to see the progress on that. 2D is a lot of fun. My brother does 2D animation, and like what I love about 2D is, well, kind of like what I was about to talk about here, is how you can push the posing so much. You can do this in 3D, but it takes a lot of work, a lot of sculpting, a lot of not being afraid to break a rig in a lot of different ways. But with 2D, you just draw it. So we have this great, like this pose here. Look at that. His eye doesn't even line up with his face. He's got this line of his face here, and then the eye just sticks way out. On the next shot, same thing. The eye is just sticking out here. And then they really exaggerate this. Oh, is he going to make an appearance? Eventually, when his schedule opens up a little bit. I've actually got it set up so that we can stream at the same time. And like he could work on the Cintiq there. I could work on my system here. And we could actually do a co-stream, which it would be really cool. Just scheduling more than anything. In terms of the animation, they just look at how much they push this, where they really have this squash pose here, and then to really exaggerate how angry he is, the head starts to stretch first, so they're leading with the head. Then the arms come up. Look at this beautiful squash just in the eyes alone. Look how much the eyes are squashing and stretching here. And then he comes down and into this beautiful pose there. Look at that. The eyes have connected in the middle. And all the time before this, there's a gap. And then suddenly, no gap. And the mouth just disappears into the mustache. It's so appealing. And then this. Like, I talk a lot about really trying to exaggerate the F and D shapes when you're doing lip sync. Look at that. Look at how much they're exaggerating. All the lines coming into there as he's biting his lip. That is very tricky to do in CG because we don't really have lines to deal with. We have shapes and shading. Unless you go the extra mile and add visual lines, which unless the whole project has that, can kind of feel weird if you're just adding it in one moment. That is hard to do, to really sell. Look how tight his bottom mouth is, or bottom lip is. It's so good. And that squash and stretch. Oh. And then the eye once again goes out. You just have full freedom. And the other thing I love is you're not restricted to a rig. Now, this is not a huge thing, but this comes just to the freedom of animation. Is when you're animating in CG, you're very reliant on what rigs you have available. At this point, honestly, especially if you're using Maya, you have a huge range of rigs that you can use. It is amazing. But let's say I wanted to animate two characters with very different proportions, but still have them kind of fit in the same world. That can be very hard to find two rigs that kind of match each other. In this case, we have one character who is basically, let's pick a different color here. His body is mostly upper body. So you get to see this really big upper body and very tiny legs. Very small. His ratio is hugely upper body. Now this other character, he's sitting down, but even as he's sitting down, if we can kind of imagine his body here, you can see how he is mostly legs. His pose would be something like this, based on where his legs are positioned. So he is much more leg based, and he's not even standing yet. That is the beauty of 2D. And the reason why I really want to push myself to learn 2D is for that freedom, for that ability to create something that is not restricted in any way. Does that mean CG is not as good? No, not at all. It's just different. That's really it. It's just a different approach. It's like doing stop motion. I would love to do stop motion one day just because it's a different way of approaching animation and seeing it, and kind of basically you could put it this way. The more ways you can kind of approach animation, the more ways you learn about it, and the way then you can kind of apply the things that you learn in different mediums into the others. So if I got better at 2D, I would also get better at 3D. That's really it. It would give me new ways to learn. So I love his laugh here. So good. Yeah, look at those legs. His knee comes right up to his chest. Uh, his would not. His knee would come up to here at most. And then we've got this nice little animation here. Now, what I really love about this is the cuts. How these are not just basic cuts. They've got this kind of little transition. And what it creates is the illusion that the camera swings around. Even though it technically doesn't, by having the image kind of stretch upwards, and then suddenly we have like the connection here between the characters, and it switches to this, it creates the feeling that the camera has suddenly tilted and then settles in, so it doesn't just snap. That's a really nice little touch. Honestly, if we're doing it in CG, we could just have the camera whip around, but if you're animating 2D, that's a really nice little, I guess you could say, cheat to avoid having just a straight cut, and also to not have to animate in perspective as the camera whips around, because that's very difficult. Look at those little legs. But then here, this, I love this because this is a moment of really pushing the pose. They are going from squashed pose. Look at how his body is basically all overlapping shapes. We've got the form of the chest here, which is overlapping the form of the waist, and the head that's overlapping, or this is a 2D sense of overlapping, not the 3D. Basically doing this, where one shape is over top of the other. The head is over top of, I'll try to use different terminology, over top of the body. So you've got this really squashed pose. Everything's compressed down. And it's a very dynamic pose. And they exaggerate that into this, stretching it to the max. Look at how wide the shoulders go, how narrow they go, how much they're really pushing that squash and stretch here. I love this little smile right there. You really feel it in the eyes, how the eye corners are higher here. It really makes that happiness shine through there. But such a dynamic change. And this is something we could do in 3D. There's nothing stopping us from doing something like that. And it's just so interesting visually to look at. So those were the main notes that I actually wanted to talk about on this shot. There's a lot of other things that we could talk about in terms of like timing and like just the way his hair overlaps here, all sorts of things like that. But honestly, that's kind of the core elements here. And it's so brilliantly done. I would highly recommend checking out Old Swifty, Michael Doig Art, and Anima Tunings on Twitter, or checking out their YouTube channels as well, or their Twitch channel, which is linked down below. Doig and Swift have amazing stuff. They actually did an analysis of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, recently. It is so good. Highly recommend checking out